A friend of mine from nursing school swears this happened to her sister-in-law just 3 years ago in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Sarah had always been skeptical of ghost stories, but what happened during her daughter Emma's weaning process changed everything she believed about the supernatural. It started on a humid Tuesday night in August 2021. Sarah lived in one of those charming Victorian houses on East Main Street, the kind with wraparound porches and century-old oak trees. She'd been gradually weaning 18-month-old Emma for about 2 weeks, following her pediatrician's advice to take it slow and gentle. The first strange thing happened around 2 in the morning. Sarah woke to Emma crying, which wasn't unusual during the weaning process. But as she walked down the hallway toward the nursery, she noticed something odd. The crying seemed to be coming from multiple directions at once, like an echo bouncing off invisible walls. When she reached Emma's room, her daughter was standing in her crib, tears streaming down her face, pointing at the rocking chair in the corner. The old wooden chair, a family heirloom from Sarah's grandmother, was moving back and forth in a steady rhythm. No breeze, no disturbance, just a gentle, purposeful rocking motion. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up Emma. The moment she lifted her daughter, the rocking stopped. She chalked it up to stress and lack of sleep. Weaning was hard on both mother and child, after all. Her friends had warned her about the emotional toll, the guilt, the way it felt like severing an invisible cord between them. The next evening, Sarah was scrolling through her phone while Emma played with blocks on the living room floor. She'd joined a local moms group on Facebook earlier that week, looking for support during the weaning process. That's when she saw a post that made her blood run cold. "Has anyone else experienced weird things while weaning?" The post read. "My baby keeps staring at empty corners and laughing, but there's nothing there. Also, I keep hearing what sounds like a baby crying, but it's not my baby. She's right next to me, sleeping peacefully." The comments flooded in. Mothers from all over Middle Tennessee sharing similar experiences. Phantom crying, toys moving on their own, babies reaching for invisible figures, cold spots in nurseries. Most unsettling of all, several women mentioned the same recurring dream about a woman in white standing over their child's crib. Sarah screenshot the post and sent it to her sister-in-law, the one who told me this story. "This is probably nothing," she texted, "but Emma's been acting strange since we started weaning." That night, Sarah decided to set up her phone to record Emma's room. She'd read about sleep studies and wanted to see if there was a pattern to her daughter's restless nights. She positioned the phone on the dresser, angled toward the crib, and started recording before going to bed. At 3:17 in the morning, Sarah bolted upright. Emma was crying again, but this time there was something different about the sound. It seemed muffled, distant, like it was coming from underwater. She grabbed her phone and rushed to the nursery. Emma stood in her crib, but she wasn't looking at Sarah. Her gaze was fixed on something behind her mother, something Sarah couldn't see. The toddler's arms were outstretched, and she was making the nursing motion she'd done since infancy, opening and closing her tiny fists. "Mama," Emma whispered, but her eyes never left the spot behind Sarah. "Mama hungry?" Sarah spun around. The nursery was empty, but the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees. She could see her breath forming small clouds in the suddenly frigid air. She scooped up Emma and ran to her bedroom, locking the door behind them. They spent the rest of the night huddled together in Sarah's bed, Emma finally settling into peaceful sleep around dawn. The next morning, Sarah reviewed the phone recording. For the first few hours, everything looked normal. Emma tossed and turned occasionally, but nothing unusual. Then, at 3:15, just 2 minutes before Sarah had woken up, a shadow appeared in the corner of the frame. It wasn't a trick of the light or a play of shadows from passing cars. This was a distinct, human-shaped silhouette that seemed to glide across the room toward Emma's crib. The shadow bent over the crib, and that's when Emma began to cry on the recording. Sarah's hands shook as she watched the shadow straighten up and turn toward the camera. For just a moment, she could make out features in the darkness. A woman's face, gaunt and hollow-eyed, with long hair that seemed to move in an unfelt breeze. Then the shadow vanished, and moments later, Sarah could be heard running down the hallway on the recording. Desperate for answers, Sarah dove deeper into the Facebook group. She private messaged several of the mothers who'd shared similar experiences. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. Every woman who'd reported supernatural activity during weaning lived in houses that were at least 50 years old. Most were in Tennessee, but a few were scattered across the Southeast. All of them described the same figure, a woman in white or a dark shadow that seemed drawn to nursing mothers and their babies. One woman, Janet from Nashville, had done extensive research after her own terrifying experience. She'd discovered local newspaper articles dating back to the 1920s about a woman named Mary Catherine Henley, who died in childbirth at Murfreesboro General Hospital. Mary Catherine had been unable to nurse her baby before she died, and according to the articles, she'd become obsessed with the idea that her child would starve without her. The baby had survived, raised by Mary Catherine's sister, but strange reports began surfacing within months of Mary Catherine's death. Nursing mothers throughout Rutherford County reported feeling watched while feeding their babies. Some claimed to see a woman in a white nightgown standing in their doorways, watching with hungry, desperate eyes. The sightings seemed to spike during times when mothers were weaning their children, as if Mary Catherine was drawn to the emotional and spiritual severing that occurred when breastfeeding ended. Sarah learned that her house on East Main Street was built in 1923, just 2 years after Mary Catherine's death. The previous owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, had mentioned something odd when Sarah bought the house. She'd said the nursery always felt active, and that babies seemed to sleep better in other rooms. Armed with this information, Sarah made a difficult decision. She temporarily moved Emma's crib to the master bedroom and continued the weaning process there. The supernatural activity decreased dramatically, though Emma continued to occasionally stare at empty corners and reach for invisible figures. 3 weeks later, when Emma was fully weaned, the activity stopped entirely. The nursery returned to normal temperature, and the oppressive feeling that had settled over the house lifted like morning fog. But Sarah's story doesn't end there. Last month, she called her sister-in-law in tears. Emma, now 4 years old, had been playing in the nursery, which had been converted to a playroom. Sarah found her daughter having what appeared to be a conversation with someone invisible. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Sarah had asked. Emma looked up with those innocent eyes that only children possess. "The sad lady who used to feed babies. She says she's still hungry, Mommy. She wants to know if you have any milk." Sarah immediately moved Emma's toys to another room and hasn't let her play in there since. But sometimes, late at night, she still hears that gentle rocking sound coming from the chair in the corner. And on particularly quiet evenings, when the Tennessee humidity hangs thick in the air, she swears she can hear the soft sound of someone crying. The Facebook group continues to grow. New mothers join regularly, sharing their own encounters with the woman in white. Some post photos that show unexplained shadows or orbs near their babies' cribs. Others share audio recordings of phantom crying that doesn't match their children's voices. What's most disturbing is the pattern that's emerged. The activity always intensifies during weaning, as if Mary Catherine is drawn to that moment when the primal bond between mother and child begins to change. Local paranormal investigators have theorized that she's searching for the connection she never had with her own baby, forever hungry for the maternal experience that death stole from her. Sarah still lives in the house on East Main Street. She's considered moving, but Emma loves her school and has made friends in the neighborhood. Besides, as long as they avoid the old nursery, Mary Catherine seems content to remain in the shadows. But sometimes Sarah wonders what will happen when Emma grows up and has children of her own. Will Mary Catherine return, drawn by the scent of milk and the sound of a baby's cry? And if she does, will she be content to simply watch from the corners? Or will her hunger finally drive her to take what she's been searching for all these years? The mothers in the Facebook group continue to share their stories, and the sightings haven't stopped. Just last week, a woman in Franklin posted a photo of her baby's nursery. In the background, barely visible in the shadows by the window, stands a figure in white. The post has been shared hundreds of times, but when people try to comment or react to it, they find that it's vanished from their feeds. Some say Facebook's algorithm flagged it as spam. Others believe Mary Catherine doesn't want her presence documented too clearly. But the mothers know the truth. They recognize the hunger in those hollow eyes, the desperate reaching of spectral arms toward their nursing babies, and they understand that some bonds transcend death, creating a need so powerful that not even the grave can satisfy it.